So what happens here is something happens in the middle while this container is being built. Something happens, and in spiral dynamics, in this chart, somewhere right around here, you're going to possibly start waking up and getting into second tier consciousness. And this chart is upside down, goes the other way. Remember, these are in the slides that are on Etsy, or you can Google spiral dynamics charts. You can do that too. Or I think I Googled spiral dynamics first tier wisdom, something like that. First tier consciousness, second tier consciousness, that kind of thing. Got these little charts, and you can read these and study them. They're very interesting. But something happens while you're in the middle of your enculturation. Hopefully, if you're on schedule, somewhere between the ages of say 30 and 40, somewhere around there. I barely got in. Mine started right around 39, with inklings happening before then, but nothing I could put my thumb on really. And then, so I'm going to represent that when you cross into that next tier of consciousness. I'm going to represent that with this little red line right here. And before the red line, notice over here on the right, I have a little Pinocchio. Up until then, as long as you're first stage consciousness, you are a wooden Pinocchio. You're not a real boy. We're going to call that first tier consciousness. And a lot of people spend their entire lives in first tier consciousness and never come out. And that's not good or bad. It just is what it is. And if the only way you could value it as good or bad is if you realize that getting into second tier consciousness will enable you to be more loving and helpful to a wider array of people, including yourself. And so in second tier consciousness, you have an increased capacity for good with the same amount of sincerity, you might say. Okay? Over here, on the way to becoming a real boy, I have ego death with an S and apostrophe, because you might have several ego deaths that take you into second tier consciousness. Now, what else happens in second tier consciousness? I have these two things down here. I have your false self and your authentic self both continue to go forward. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see this passage to the best degree possible. He said, "Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them, but let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn." Well, guess what's going to happen? These tares are going to be gathered up and burned. Like 1 Corinthians chapter 3, whoever buildeth on these, wood, hay, or stubble, precious stones, it's going to be tried by fire. We're going to figure out what it is. All this stuff is burning up. It is all burning up. So you got to figure out a way to actually come through your authentic self. So this passage here, where you have the wheat and the tares going together, that is the passage that I have between these two arrows. Okay? I have the tares over here, that's your false self, and I have the wheat over here, that's your authentic self. So now for the rest of your life, you have what Paul has. It is no longer I that do it, but, the flesh. I myself, with my mind, serve the law of God, but with my flesh, serve the law of sin and death. That will exist for the rest of your life. You can't get rid of your ego because you still have to interface with society. And I'm going to explain some more of that using some analogies like with computer input-output devices. Your ego is essentially your input-output device for interfacing with you, for mediating society and communities, and you have to have an ego self in order to interface on this planet. But what we need you to do is realize that that's not you. So these other arrows that I have here is where you regain and re-emerge the authentic self, coming out of realizing that your enculturation is a double bind, going into second tier consciousness, suffering some ego deaths, becoming a real boy, finding your authentic self, realizing Christ in you, the hope of glory. So now, your authentic self, with functional but not domineering societal interface. So your ego is still there functioning, so you interface with the rest of society, but it is not domineering, and you don't have it confused for who you really are. And then I have over here, now we're hitting the mark. We are our authentic selves, and we've become a real boy. Pinocchio has turned into a real boy. In Job 23:10, but he knoweth the way that I take, but when he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. So these ego deaths is going to be suffering and pain. Jordan Peterson recently spoke in Ephesus, and I watched the video of it, and I thought it was a very good video. And it's standard Jordan Peterson stuff, but he's got such a way of wording things. It's just amazing to listen to sometimes. He said, and this, you tie all this together with how Fowler says usually it's some crisis mediation that causes growth into the next stage. And Richard Rohr says great love and great suffering are necessary for transformation. And Ian McGilchrist and John Vervaeke talk about, this some kind of great suffering that a person undergoes which provokes transformation. And then, you know all that. And Jordan Peterson had a great way of wording it. He said maybe pain is the only thing that's like really real. The only thing that you really know is really real is pain. And the only reason you grow, and I'm inferring here from this, the only reason you grow, you can't grow until you've experienced pain, is because since pain is the most real thing, the only thing that you can learn at that point is whatever will ameliorate the pain or make it acceptable. And that is the only thing that is more real than the pain. And so it is really only after encountering pain experientially, participatorily, that you start to build up who you're really going to become by how you deal with that.